Okay, so to paraphrase the title of a popular film that I didn't care for, uh, we need to talk about Loki. So I'm going to do just that. I wanted to make this like Friday evening after I'd seen season finale, series finale, no, season finale, because it's going to continue, of Loki twice that day. No, I saw it twice Wednesday. I'm sorry. But I wanted to make this video on, yeah, on Thursday night or Friday, actually. One thing after another kept distracting me. I made the Black Widow video, and it hasn't been doing too well. Uh, but anyway, that's okay. Maybe this one will get a little more attention. At first, so many people were rocked and shocked by the last episode of Loki that the fan bros really were hard pressed to say anything negative about it. They couldn't quite get their heads around it, and that was a good feeling. They were kind of grudgingly forced to say nice things about it. Well, after a few days, I went ahead and dipped back into the internet, and yeah, it's changed a little bit. The landscape's already kind of degraded back to its usual form of discourse, and yeah, and Loki's being nitpicked to death, and a lot of negativity, a lot of know-it-alls, and a lot of misinformation, disinformation. I shouldn't even have looked at that stuff. Usually, I don't go much into that stuff before I do one of these. It's all coming from me, not tainted by others' views or whatever. I don't. Then I don't have to put in the energy of refuting specific things said, though I have done that in other videos. I don't really want to go to that now. I mean, I think I was spoiled the other day by actually getting overall positive response, but tonight it's, this weekend, the fan bros have been typing away and at all kinds of clickbait sites all over the place. And it's disheartening, but I don't take those people's opinions seriously anyway, so why should I care? And the people who made Loki should definitely not care. So, yeah, let's talk about this. I haven't covered this show at all. I did cover the last two MCU shows on Disney Plus, obviously the WandaVision, and WandaVision, by the way, got nominated for 23 Emmys. So that's pretty cool. It doesn't make up for the fact that Twin Peaks: The Return only got nominated for one or two and didn't win. But, it's a step in the right direction, I guess. So I talked about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier also. So Loki is my favorite of the three, I have to say. WandaVision had me held in its thrall until the last episode. I felt, which I enjoyed, but I felt as though, let's just say I'm in the minority of people who think Catherine Hahn is a brilliant, amazing, performer, godlike ability. I don't believe that. I think she's kind of a midland comedian. It's just fine for her earlier TV appearances. Playing a heavyweight character in the Marvel cinematic universe is just it's she can't really do it. I mean, it eludes her. But I'm in the minority there, as I am in quite a lot of my opinions about these things. But I felt like she changed the tone. Now, I mean, the show had comedy in the beginning, obviously, and it was parodying comedy shows. That's not the issue. The humor part isn't the issue. It's just once you saw what the threat was, all the characters involved were very earnest, and Agatha seemed to still think it was kind of a joke, and I don't know that was written that way, but that's the way she performed it. She had a really hard time doing dramatic scenes. or seeming menacing or seemed annoying. I hope she never comes back to the MCU. But right now she's a fan favorite. She wasn't nominated for Best Supporting Actress for WandaVision. I don't think. I went through the nominations and I didn't see her name. That's probably going to piss off a lot of people, so that's kind of cool. Loki did not trip up on the last episode. Falcon and Winter Soldier didn't necessarily trip up on the last episode, but you kind of knew what was going to happen, and it delivered. But Loki took things to another level, really another level, and I think it was a perfectly done show. So there were 6 episodes, and for those who don't know or don't care, Loki is this long-running character from the Marvel Universe in the comic books, and of course that was that Jack Kirby and Lee and Lieber, based on Loki from Norse mythology, obviously the God of Mischief. There were some major differences with the comic book version, as there was with the comic version of Thor. Kirby and Lee did the thing of where they were brothers instead of Loki being a blood brother of Odin, as per the myth, and so I guess Thor's uncle, though they did go on adventures together. There's one in particular I've read a million times. I forgot the name of it. I don't know if it has a name, but I forgot. I think I encountered a giant or something. Anyway, there's some memorable little bits in it. Loki shape-shifting and such, but so anyway, in the Marvel universe, Loki is Thor's adopted brother. So, and he's pretty much a one-dimensional character. Always has been. He looks cool and he does cool things and interesting things, and his powers are cool. But he was always kind of just cackling madman. I think Tom Hiddleston himself said that, the comic book Loki was really not at all removed from a madman cackling on the rooftops. And I can kind of imagine like a John Buscema drawing of that. And that's true. There were a few villains in the 60s Marvel era that had incredibly one-dimensional dialogue. Just pure evil, just ranting and raving. One was the Red Skull. Go figure. And one was Loki. And one was Magneto. Oh my God. Magneto was just over the top. And of course, since he's gone back and forth between being a hero and villain many times since, now Marvel's retconned that his powers were causing, the electromagnetism was causing some pressure in his brain and fucking up his personality, and that's why he acted erratic and evil and megalomaniacal. So anyway, I just think it was bad writing, and they should have just ignored it and kept going. Well, that's pretty much what Claremont did, and and I actually think Grant Morrison's Magneto was kind of a return to the evil Magneto. I think in a way he was parodying the early Magneto and Magneto's, I guess you want to say racial speciesist views about mutants and humans. Anyway, so that's who Loki was. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, they've based him on the comic book character, so he's Thor's brother and adopted brother. And in the first Thor movie, he learns of his true parentage. His father is Loki, who's one of the Frost Giants. I believe Colm Feore played him in the movie. So he's kind of pathetic in the movie, and in a way I don't want to say he's really likable, but he's not completely hateable either. But then in the Avengers film, he's just loathsome. And I did run into a theory when I was reading some good articles about Loki, some thoughtful ones the other day. And one stated that they believe that the reason the Avengers is the anomaly in Loki's appearance is where he's kind of the evil cackling on the rooftop, world conquest, blah blah blah, was because he was controlled by, just like the other characters like Solvig and Hawkeye. He was the power of the spear and the stone controlled him, and I guess Thanos and the other that served him, that was the liaison between Thanos and Loki, caused that or allowed that to influence him. So that actually kind of makes sense to me, because this series picks up that Loki directly after the events of the first Avengers movie. Because as we saw in Endgame, they go back in time, and by going back in time, they change a few things inadvertently, and one is that they create an opening for Loki to grab the cosmic cube or the Tesseract and escape. And the series begins with him landing on Earth in like a faraway desert, and I think the time frame is unknown. It could be the modern day. It could be decades, ago. It could be in the near future. I don't know, but I don't think they stayed a year, and that's when the TVA come in. So these guys are the Time Variance Authority, and they were from the comics. I'm pretty sure they were first introduced in She-Hulk, if I'm correct, and Dan Slott created them. But I didn't research that before doing this video. But that's about the only major concept or character in the series that I'm not really well versed on. But I was versed. I didn't know who they were and what they do, and I think they, I've seen drawings of their kind of office outside of time and space, and I think they captured it well. The office and everything being kind of banal and mundane and Earth-like, just business as usual, while they were sending out these soldiers called the Hunters to prune the timeline, the sacred timeline that had to be preserved. And apparently Loki transgressed by using the Tesseract and vanishing. But I think what it is that Loki's throughout the multiverse, or throughout the alternate universes that are timelines that have branched off. See, their mission is to destroy those branches, as I said, prune it. So a variant is something that they want to hunt and seemingly, until almost the end of the series, destroy, and then you realize their true fate. But basically, they zap them out of existence, and they call that pruning. So they preserve the tree, and they reset the era that they snatched the variant from. So they're called variants, yes, because of Time Variance Authority, but they're time variants. So in other words, each branch creates a variant, an alternate universe, an alternate reality, an alternate version of a character who has transgressed against the sacred timeline. So apparently other Lokis on other branches have done this. I don't want to say apparently, but I say apparently because to me that's the main reason they snagged the Loki of 20 whenever that year was, 2012, from that timeline, because he hadn't really been doing that previous to them. He even makes the argument, that I am only here because my timeline was, tampered with by the Avengers. Why aren't you capturing them? So he's right. But so I think, based on what you learn over the course of the series, is that Loki is maybe it's just a product of his mischievous nature, and there's other reasons too, though we'll get into. But he seems to be a being that has branched many times. So there are many variants, and after a while, the variants become so varied that some of them look different than Tom Hiddleston Loki. Some of them are quite a departure, but they're all basically the same being. And this reminded me of the comic book character Kang the Conqueror and his many alternate selves created by multiple time paradoxes like Immortus, Tut. They later made his real name Nathaniel Richards and tied him in with Reed Richards, uh, which I had mixed feelings about that, but it was fine. It's canon now. Uh, Another one of John Byrne's ideas that I didn't really care for, but that's fine. So we'll just say that that being was Nathaniel, who became Kang, Rama Tut, Scarlet Centurion, Immortus. To me, it's all fascinating. I always loved that characters. So that's kind of what they're doing. They're doing Loki. But I was kind of thinking, I wonder if they're actually going to put Kang in the story because it's like about time travel and it's about alternate selves, but they seem to be using Kang's shtick and applying it to Loki. So, well, I should have listened to my inner voice, and I'll get back to that. I made some guesses about the ending of the show, and one guess was wrong, and I was kind of glad I was wrong. One of them that I didn't dare believe would really happen did happen, and I'm pretty overjoyed. So I'm mentioning this stuff about Kang and everything for a reason. I mean, I did think of Kang when the series was going. It reminded me of, okay, he's doing the same thing that Kang does. He branches off so much that he looks different and he acts different, like a totally different person. So that brings us to our other major character besides Mr. Thomas Hiddleston's Loki. And that is, I want to get her name right. Knowing me, I'll mess it up. So I have a little cheat note. I haven't quite memorized all of this. Let's see. Sophia DiMartino. Okay, and she plays a character that she calls herself Sylvie. Okay, so Sylvie is sabotaging the timeline, jumping through time with stolen technology from the TVA and stealing more technology and murdering hunters who are come to prune the timeline and to purge her or people like her. And when I say people like her, I mean, well, we're talking about one Loki. And it doesn't take long for the show to solve the mystery of who this mysterious killer of TVA agents is and what their purpose is. And it's this woman, but it's not just that she's this woman who's a variant who's, I guess, gone AWOL and is taking it on the TVA. It's a very specific variant of a very specific character / person in our story, and that's Loki. So in the comic books, Loki had a turn as a character called Lady Loki. I believe he possessed Lady Sif's body or something, and he incarnated or whatever. And of course, in Norse mythology, he did shapeshift into female form and all kinds of other forms. I mean, there's that one story, and it might even be the one I was thinking of earlier, where he shapeshifts into a mare and has sex with a male horse, and seems pretty giddy about the whole thing, and pun unintended. And so yeah, they haven't gone deep into Loki's, like if he's a bisexual or whatever, but they do make clear in the series that he's in the 1,000 years, and this is different than the Loki of the comic books and the Loki of mythology, especially. His 1,000 some years of life, I'm sure he's had sex partners, and who knows, they may have been male, female, animal, horse, whatever. But he's never been in love. So that's about to change. So that's a major thing we're building towards. And so they quickly reveal that the Loki variant, Sylvie, well, she's a variant of Loki, but she's female, and that she actually lived on a timeline earlier than Loki. I don't know if it's hundreds of years, thousands of years, but somewhat before Loki's timeline as a child, which is roughly like 1,000 years ago. And this Loki was born female and was the goddess of mischief. So, but she was kidnapped at a very young age by this hunter called Hunter A23, and who later has, in the present day, well, it's all irrelevant here in the TVA universe or universe outside of a universe. Now she's known as Ravonna Renslayer, and she's kind of like the head of the TVA underneath these mysterious beings they call the Timekeepers. And, they're all pledged to keep the sacred timeline going. They really think what they're doing is kind of holding reality together. They all really don't have any memory beyond being in the TVA. They all believe they were created by the Timekeepers for this holy purpose. And one of the guys who's been there almost the longest with Ravonna is Mobius M. Mobius, played by Owen Wilson. And I never really cared for him in movies too much when he was younger, but as he's aged, he's gotten to be kind of a nice little character actor, and he's fantastic in this. I think that's a character from the comic books from the TVA, but I'm not sure. Again, I didn't research that, but Sylvie in the comic books, what I was going to say is that there was a Lady Loki, and out of that storyline came a character called Sylvie, and Sylvie was also known sometimes as the Enchantress. So there's already a character called the Enchantress, and she kind of took her shtick or her identity, and they got punished by her later for that. So they've kind of like taken that whole Lady Loki / Sylvie spin-off storyline and pushed it all together, and that's what this Sylvie is. Sylvie is, and she does have a power of enchantment, and she has taken the name Sylvie to differentiate herself from being Loki. And she doesn't look anything like Loki. She's a petite, blonde, British accent. Well, of course, she's one of the Asgardians, so she has a British accent. But she's got a kind of a leathery costume and cape that's kind of similar, sort of, to some of the ones that Loki's worn in some of the movies. With a little gold necklace and green. It's the key color. Though hers has more dark blue as a key color, kind of like the costume he wore in Thor Ragnarok. But anyway, so they enlist Loki. The TVA enlists Loki, our Loki, Mr. Hiddleston, to capture this variant because it's him. They think he can outwit him or he'll anticipate him. And Loki doesn't like this no free will thing. I mean, obviously, at first, he's a continuance of the Avengers Loki, so he's very arrogant and he's still got that little attitude. But, if the theory about him being possessed partially accounted for his attitude, then if that, I'm starting to really lean into that one after seeing this whole series. And if that's so, then he kind of mellows as time goes on with the Time Variance Authority. The more he's around this situation as their kind of captive, and agent to flush out Sylvie, he mellows out quite a bit and becomes a bit more thoughtful. One reason, though, in this, one catalyst that's major is he kind of cheats one time when he tries to escape early on. And he looks at his own future, and he sees that, like in Thor: Dark World, he inadvertently caused the death of his adopted mother, Frigga. And then, of course, he sees that after making up with Thor, he's killed by Thanos. That was in Infinity War. I'm just telling you what movies these are in case you haven't seen them, so you can kind of keep track. That kind of horrifies him, and I think that kind of cracks him a bit. He feels horrible guilt over killing his mother, and he feels terrible fear that it's inevitable that he will die at the hands of this much more powerful being who he had, worked for in the Avengers movie, been a pawn of. And his change, he lies, he tries to get away, he does all kinds of things, but he's Loki. But generally, he kind of gets fascinated with what the TVA is and what they're doing and why they're hunting Sylvie and what the deal is with the Timekeepers and who actually are the Timekeepers and what it was the TVA created as it's told to him by Ravonna and Mobius, or is it something much deeper? And when he gets to know Sylvie, his here's her origin, which I kind of halfway related earlier. When she's snatched out of the timeline by A23 or Ivana, um, she ends up escaping and then kind of obviously lives for thousands of years and at some point begins this vendetta on the TVA and starts doing the sabotage and murders that they're hunting her down for. So she wants revenge for her life being taken away, her whole timeline being destroyed, She still has memories of Asgard. She still has the powers of Loki and somewhat of the personality. But our Loki, he tends to they have kind of a banter and kind of a little sparring. You kind of expect that, but after a while, it becomes a little obvious that this is like the classic. They're bickering because they have sexual tension. So, I said earlier that Loki had never been in love until now. It's going to change. So he is falling in love with Sylvie, and that's the brilliance of it, because the only being that Loki could really, really deeply fall in love with would have to be himself, being a total narcissist. So it's a mirror reflection of himself, but it's female, and there's like a sexual dynamic there that can be explored. And, there are some valences and nuances in their characters from diverging for so long. But they're still essentially the same character, and they, but they're going to have a hard time having a relationship because, as they sum up a couple of times near the end of the series, and in the last episode especially, Sylvie cannot trust and Loki cannot be trusted. So, but you're kind of rooting for them to get together. This is a really atmospheric series. Atmospheric in the sense of, first of all, it's beautifully shot, incredible effects. Everything's well imagined and just stunning. Photography, the set design, the costumes, all of the acting is top notch. Hiddleston is I know he did before this, but if there was any question at all before this, he just absolutely fucking owns this role. And he's actually made Loki one of my very favorite characters in the MCU. I mean, he was kind of verging that way in Ragnarok, by the time Ragnarok and Infinity War, by the time I saw those. But yeah, I just got to say, he's really added even more depth and layers here by stripping Loki of his comfort zone, so to speak, having power and fighting unfamiliar territory like Earth or Asgard against familiar foes like Thor. He's cast into something cosmic that's totally beyond his kin, that even growing up as a son of Odin, he can't quite get his head around, but he's not a dummy, this Loki, and he kind of he's a guy who he talks a lot about himself and etc., but as this series progresses, he becomes kind of a watcher. I mean, he's kind of observing while he's participating, and you really start to see that by episode 5, because there are a few twists, and one is that Loki and Sylvie do confront the timekeepers. They do get to the bottom of things, and they're just these 3 robots. Now, the main timekeeper that talks, his mask, helmet, they're kind of like statues, sort of, but they talk or whatever. But his mask and helmet are very reminiscent of Kang. So that was another thing I thought and so they destroy the timekeepers and reveal their true nature, and the head of the main timekeeper rolls into the floor, and so you get a pretty good look at it, and I was like, that really does look like Kang. So it's not Kang, but maybe it is Kang. It's definitely a hint, a clue, an Easter egg. So they confront Ravonna, and then one of the other hunters starts to gain free will and remember that she wasn't created by the timekeepers, that she had another life, that she was a variant. And then Mobius finds out the truth that they're all variants. You know, they themselves were plucked from the timeline and had some kind of lives somewhere else in some undetermined year or planet. Though I'm sure some of them were from Earth, but probably all different versions of Earth and maybe other planets. I don't know. Everyone looks human in this. So Mobius and Loki have come to trust each other. Mobius has a soft spot for this guy, and I think he believes redemption is possible. And there's a lot of hints and skirting around that idea, which, you know, they kind of played with Loki and Ragnarok anyway. And this kind of gives voice to it, except this is a different Loki. But then you wonder, there's a line that Mobius says, and I can't remember what it is, but he kind of hints that, contrary to what Loki thinks, his ultimate fate may not be to be evil and a betrayer and defeated and killed, but possibly to be good, to be redeemed. And I think there's some truth in that, you know, because obviously the prime Loki that we know of that died, he was more or less a good guy when Thanos killed him. I mean, he pretty much gave his life to save the Asgardians to try to kill Thanos. I'm going to cry thinking about it. But anyway, somebody near and dear to me said that she was crying when Loki died in Infinity War. I wasn't, but you know, I get it. I did cry a tiny bit on that last episode of this, just a little bit. So I'll get to that. So as we hit toward like episode 5, the truth is out, but not all of the truth. And so Loki and Sylvie are determined to see this quest through. They want to see what's beyond the timekeeper. So yeah, you know, as I read tonight, you know, and this writer was like acted like this was an incredible, insightful, brilliant revelation that they alone came up with. That it was like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain, or whatever. You know, we get it. I mean, that's obvious. So, you know, who is the man behind the curtain, or woman, or is it a character that's already in the show? I started to think it was Loki himself. It was going to be another variant, and the quest has turned out to be he's seeking himself all the time. I mean, that's a cool conundrum, but it has been done quite a bit in fiction, and maybe it's just too obvious by now. But it wouldn't surprise me if maybe they didn't think about that. But I don't think they did, because the direction they went in makes perfect sense and makes the whole series in hindsight make much more sense and much more rewarding, and also much more fertile ground for future stories in the MCU. So basically, episode 5 is called Journey into Mystery, which was the name of the comic book that Loki was first introduced in, as well as Thor. I liked that. And then it is a journey into mystery, because they're going into this place. Well, basically, what it appears is that Loki is killed fighting Ravana, and Mobius is killed by Ravana. Now, Loki wakes up in this place called the Void, and he's woken up by 3 variants of himself. There's this one called Kid Loki, who wears one of the many kind of variants of the costumes created by Jack Kirby that he clothed Loki in. There was like 2 or 3 main costumes Loki wore, and then other times he would wear something very different, or more of a deviation from that. So the kid is the one where he's got kind of the things on his. It looks like little F's on his, or like little wings on his head and a little thing. And of course, a splash of green and everything, and the black hair. And he said he killed Thor in his timeline, I guess when they were kids. And then there's one called Boastful Loki, which is a black guy who, I guess, I don't know if it's a shape-shifted Loki or just one of those, you know, time branchy things, but he has a hammer. I don't think it's not Mjolnir, so I kind of think he made his own hammer to emulate Thor, and he brags about how in his timeline he defeated, Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man, but Loki doesn't believe it. Kid Loki doesn't believe it. Okay, so then there's alligator Loki, which is just a green alligator, but obviously an intelligent one, though it doesn't speak. And it has the big horns, or as Matt Damon called them in Ragnarok, the helmet with the bendy horns, which is Loki's kind of classic look, which he had a variation of in the first Thor movie. And then in the Avengers, he had the exact look. And then there was a variation of it in Ragnarok where he wore kind of a metal headband with the horns coming up. So, I like the fact that they've kept the iconography and the basic look and signifiers of these characters visually. I like the way that the Marvel Cinematic Universe will take the character and they'll always be clad in the colors they're the most known for in the comic books. So it just continues that feeling of it being an iconic retelling of an iconic tale. So Loki, of course, is gold and green, especially green, but the horns are also a part of it. And in the comic books, he did have black hair that looked just like it's styled in the comics. So all of those visual elements were created and designed by Jack Kirby. I just want to get that out of the way. You probably heard that. You probably knew that was coming or have heard that before, but just to be clear, more of Kirby's just towering genius. Kirby's Asgard is what's in the films, and etc. So, well, yeah. Third Loki and fourth Loki, he stumbles upon him as he's awakening. They call him Classic Loki? Credits. Now he is played by Richard E. Grant, a very respected British actor. I last saw him in Logan as I think the character's name was Dr. Xander Rice. And he was the son of the guy who was in charge of the Weapon X program. And he himself was in charge of continuing, all that and the genetic experimentation and all that horrible stuff. Maybe one day I'll review Logan. I do have it on Blu-ray, and it really is my favorite X-Men movie. But anyway, I saw him in that last. And, of course, he's famous among cult film fans as With Nail and I, which I will confess I have never seen. My good friend Sean Lee Levin told me he enjoyed him in that role. So he plays Classic Loki, and Classic Loki, appropriate for an episode called Journey into Mystery, has the most iconic costume of the comic book Loki. He's got kind of this jagged kind of thing here, and he's got not just a golden helmet with those horns, but also kind of only his face is showing. He's got kind of a thing that a hood that kind of covers him, and then he's got kind of a band of gold, and then mostly green, and then gold, yellow gloves, yellow boots. Now the thing is, they don't try to make him look realistic. They don't try to update or make three-dimensional that costume like they did, with Loki himself. It's actually exactly that costume, and it's flat, and it looks like the old kind of cheesy superhero shows that just had guys in not very good shape or very skinny guys wearing these just leotards of just plain primary colors. So that era, thankfully, is gone, but this is a throwback, so it's like, but it kind of works because it's like kind of like he is playing, and he's also got a long yellow cape, which Loki did wear a few times in the comic books, notably in the Avengers Defenders Wars, which is where I first saw him when I was a little tot. He had that cape. So I think it's kind of presenting us with the iconic Loki as another variant, another alternate being. And they each, well, not the alligator, but they each tell their stories to our Loki, and he realizes he's not dead, he's not in hell, he's in this place called the Void, which is beyond the timekeepers. It's beyond. It's at the end of time, and this is where all the variants have been sent when they're zapped. They're not destroyed. They're zapped to this place at the end of time, and there they have to try to survive in this hostile kind of weird world cobbled together with elements of all kinds of different time periods and things. And it's a very dark and gloomy world. But these four Lokis have banded together for survival, and it's kept them alive. And I guess classic Loki is kind of the leader. His powers are a little more like the comic book Loki's in the sense that he's more powerful with his magic and illusions than our Loki is, at least as of this time. His character's given the most in-depth story, and he's of course the finest actor of the bunch, and so it's very cool. And he talks about how he faked his own death and he escaped being killed by Thanos, and for untold centuries, hid out on this planet, and then he became lonely and he missed his brother. And when he says that, Tom Hiddleston's Loki looks kind of, sympathetic. He has a lot of really good nuanced facial expressions in this that just get more emotional and expressive in the last episode. So basically, they find out that the boastful Loki guy is kind of a sleeper agent, a spy, spying for this other band of renegade Lokis, and they're led by this character named President Loki, who is played by Tom Hiddleston, and he's got a variation on the classic costume, the movie's classic costume with the horns and the green, but it's also like a suit, and he's like President Loki, and he's got these political sloganeering buttons on. So, I guess they're commenting on politicians all being craven liars, but, spot on there. He doesn't last too long, and they all start squabbling among themselves, and the others escape. By this time, Sylvie has figured out maybe where Loki is and that he's not dead. And so she tries to Ravonna tries to make a deal with her, and vice versa, but Ravonna can't be trusted. She tries to get her anyway. And so Sylvie just says, fuck it, and stabs herself with one of the wands that zap people out back all the way to the void. I think she's kind of figured it out, and she has. And so she emerges in the void, and she's in a different place than the Lokis. And she meets up with Mobius, and of course, he's not dead either. He was zapped there. And Ravonna makes a lot of the fact that she didn't want to do that to him, and but he kind of sold out the TVA. But his really thing was, okay, I'm hearing about the real nature of the TVA. Let's learn what it is. And the thing is, she wants to know too. The difference is Mobius has decided that, like Sylvie and Loki, he wants to bring it down because it's fake. She, however, still believes in it and so wants to serve it. She just wants to know who the fuck she's serving. And so she also decides she's going to try to get to the end of time. But first, within the void, this little motley group finally has to fight off this being called Eliath. There's this kind of giant amorphous but semi-forming creature. It's kind of cloudy and dark blue and purple and bright eyes. Really cool. And basically it's a being that, the way they describe him in episode 6, he has some power. I can't remember now. He was chosen to be the guardian of the void because he had some kind of power that affected the timelines or the whatever. So he's just like this monstrous guardian. So Loki plans, we're going to kill him. So the two Lokis, Loki and Sylvie, basically realize they can't kill him, but she can enchant him. And then classic Loki pops up and uses his illusion as a distraction, which costs him his life. And he dies saying glorious purpose, Loki's line. And Loki and Sylvie go beyond the void. And the end of episode 5 is really just, you see them from the back walking through this kind of cloudy, just great colored, mystical kind of abyss, a void. So in the next episode, they walk in and they've gone into a castle. There's a castle there. They found a castle, and it also looks very cool. So now they're beyond the end of time. And this place is called the Citadel at the end of time. So, um, with the face of the timekeepers, and I didn't mention this earlier. I did not mention this earlier, but the first name of Renslayer, Ravana, that's an Easter egg. Shout out to Roy Thomas's Avengers comics. And then the Citadel at the end of time. I should have figured this all out, what it was going to be. I was still a little surprised, though. I mean, I thought, okay, we're going to see Kang, but what's this going to be like? And then they mention that the being inside of the castle is He Who Remains, which in the comic books was one of Kang's later pseudonyms or epithets. I didn't know that, though. I didn't know that was from the comics. I suspected it was, but I wasn't sure. But it is. I did research that. So then I would have known it for sure if I'd been absolutely certain of that. But still, I wasn't sure how was this going to work. And what happens is it takes me completely off guard. Basically, after a little bit of action and a little bit of this and that to the side story, which is basically Mobius getting sent back by Loki and Sylvie, I believe, to the TVA reality, and Ravana and him almost coming to blows, and she tells him she's going to find out, who's behind all this. And so she goes into one of the time things. Basically, there are these like doors that are like white, and you walk through them and you come out on the other side. They're kind of a vertical version of the horizontal ones that Doctor Doom used in the Marvel comics. And they would you'd stand on them and they kind of rise up, and of course more of you would disappear into them. So this is like a vertical, and maybe that's been used in the comics and I'm not aware of it. But it's definitely a Marvel kind of a visual element. So we never revisit Ravana. We don't know where she's gone and how she's going to find He Who Remains. So she doesn't know that's who he is or what he is yet. In the comic books, Ravana was Kang's lover. So I'm tempted to think that she will find a variant of He Who Remains, and it will be Kang, and they will hook up, or in some way or another, partners or lovers or enemies. I don't know. But I think there's going to be some kind of link there. I don't think they named her that just for the heck of it. So when Loki and Sylvie, basically it comes down to Loki and Sylvie in the castle in the last episode. And they come in and they meet, the guy behind the curtain, so to speak. Okay, so he's an African American man. He's tall. He's got like a very fancy, kind of futuristic leisure outfit, like robes, and but he's got like a pants and a suspenders, but he's got this purple kind of thing that has like a shawl over it, and the shape of it reminded me of Kang, and the color reminded me of Kang, because purple is Kang's primary color. His second primary color is green, even though his face is blue, or black. I don't know if it's supposed to be black or blue. But this guy looks like an African American human, and so at first I'm like, okay, so he's not Kang, he's some new character. And actually, I read Wikipedia tonight, and that was one of the ones that pushed me over the edge. It said that He Who Remains is a brand new character created for the show that is inspired in part by the Marvel character called He Who Remains, and also the character Immortus. And it's like no mention of Kang, no mention of the time paradox, the multiple identities, the alternate realities, no mention of the fact that, no, he is the character. He's the prime character. In other words, he's the Nathaniel Richards character. And he tells his origin. He illustrates it. He has this little weird kind of amulet thing. And he's got all the super advanced time magic. It's science, but it's so advanced, it's like magic. And he creates these kind of little clay people, and they're him. And he shows, him as a scientist on a 31st century Earth, which that is the origin of his character in the comic books. His origin is it's perfect. He meets one of his other selves, and all these other things happen. They realize there's many universes, there's a multiverse. And so he begins traversing it and replicating himself and creating all these different selves. And and he said some of them are evil, some of them are conquerors. Because he said, they ask him, "Who are you really?" And he says, "I've been called by many names: a ruler, a conqueror, a jerk." Um, and yeah, as soon as he said a conqueror, I knew that was obviously supposed to be Kang. And then the more he talked, when he showed the origin, I knew that was supposed to be Nathaniel Richards, the kind of point zero of Kang, ground zero of Kang, the patient zero that becomes all the other characters. And I thought him being a black actor was fitting because one of the first incarnations that Nathaniel Richards took was in ancient Egypt. He goes back and he becomes a leader under the name Rama Tut. Now, of course, in the 60s comics, Rama Tut is portrayed as Caucasian, and that was considered de rigueur. Now of course, Egyptians were probably more closer to African Americans in appearance. So I'm hoping at some point they will show this actor, Jonathan Majors is his name, as Rama Tut in a historically accurate Egyptian look, which is progress, I have to say. So Jonathan Majors, by the way, I had only seen him passing. I saw part of the first episode of Lovecraft Country. I knew he looked familiar, but I couldn't remember anything about it. I didn't finish watching it, and from what I've read, he's gotten a lot of acclaim for his performance in that show, and he really is amazing. I mean, he's extremely nuanced in his performance, and this is what opens up the whole series and to infinite possibilities, and that's upon on many levels deliberate, and it basically becomes a three-way conversation. Well, it's really more sort of a monologue where he's explaining himself at length to Loki and Sylvie, and then they interject from time to time, and Sylvie keeps wanting to try to kill him, but he can kind of move around through time quickly like the TVA can. And so, but he tells the story unfolds, and that's what it boils down to, is that he's the original, and he sees that all these other realities were created, and a lot of his selves were evil, and continued to find other realities to conquer. And so a multiversal war broke out, and he found a way to end the multiverse, and it was the TVA. So he uses it as his front to eliminate all these other timelines and branches, and of course, evil versions of himself, so not to endanger all reality. So, in a way, he is a good guy. I mean, he's Machiavellian, and he says to them at one point, he's like, "We're all villains here. We're all murderers." That's great, but he's very Shakespearean, but he's also kind of got this whimsical, ridiculous sense of humor, and I think Jonathan Majors said he was or maybe the writer of the show, I can't remember, one of them said he was like a charming sociopath. So, but I do think as far as on the scale of the Kangs, now Rama Tut and Immortus in the comics both started a little sinister, but became good as time went on. There were different versions of them too. Immortus was the destined being that Kang was going to grow into, which was going to be I don't want to say heroic, but a neutral being who lived in limbo, ruled limbo. So I would say that this character is got all the shades in him, and his other selves are going to have different valences. That's going to be incredible if they have him play multiple Kangs, or Kang and Rama Tut and Immortus, and maybe the Scarlet Centurion. I don't know. But I do believe this is Nathaniel Richards, the patient zero, the ground zero Kang, and he is still somewhat of a good guy even after his aeons of living and traveling and seeing all this. The TVA is really his life's work to fix it. What he unleashed onto the universe, and by fracturing it. So by pruning, he's pruning it closer to one universe. I mean, there's still alternate universes, obviously, and alternate timelines, because obviously everything in Endgame made that clear, and this show itself. But he's done the best he can. He's trying to he's got it under control. And the main, thorn in his side was Sylvie. But he tells them that he wants to retire and he wants to leave his citadel at the end of time and control the TVA and all his power. He said he found the perfect person, but it turned out to be two people. And it was Loki and Sylvie, who's also Loki. So two variants of Loki. And it's really interesting that he chose Loki. It's like but he chose a Loki who was a little more enlightened than the one in Avengers, not as evil or not under mind control, but definitely more headed toward redemption. And maybe this is his He Who Remains, his attempt at ultimate redemption before he dies is to keep the TVA going. But of course, the argument Sylvie has is that you ruin people's lives like mine, and you lied to all these people, these variants you pulled in and told them you created them. And he feels like the ends justify the means. He's utterly Machiavellian. But in the big picture, for the greater good, he's a good guy. And our Loki sees that. And he says, he may be insane, but I believe he's telling the truth. She said, he's a liar. And Loki says, so am I. And that's how I know he's not lying. And they start to have a fight, a physical fight, over Loki stopping Sylvie from killing the He Who Remains character, the Nathaniel Richards character. They haven't called him that yet, or they may never call him that. So it gets heartbreaking, and this is when, most of the show has been taken by Jonathan Majors embodying this character and fleshing out this whole reality and giving us the truth. And I think it's very effective. It will affect anyone who watches it strongly. But I will say this: if you're a comic book fan and know the characters, at least almost as well as me, if not as well. Like I said, I know all of them except the TVA. I'm not an expert on, but if you know like who Kang is and what his origin is, and you know anything at all about Loki, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and alternate realities or timelines in the Marvel Universe, you'll really appreciate this. You'll get a thrill once you see, like, wow, this aspect of the Marvel Universe, this kind of grand scope, cosmic scope, is taking shape. And this is kind of the next vista beyond Thanos. And Thanos, sorry. I grew up saying Thanos, and it's funny, when I watched Infinity War, I didn't really pay attention to how they pronounced his name in Guardians of the Galaxy, but I noticed they all called him Thanos, except Bruce Banner. When the Hulk is cast to Earth by Heimdall and Doctor Strange finds him, and he goes, Thanos is coming, and Doctor Strange is like, Thanos, and then they go back to calling him Thanos. So I guess both are equally correct. So if I slip, I'm calling him by his alternate universe name, okay? So it's equally valid. It's just an alternate universe. Like Counter Earth is an Earth on the other side of the sun, spinning, but just like Earth, except that's another Roy Thomas concept, and that's another thing for the comic books. But anyway, one day they'll probably put Counter Earth in the movies. But I really loved Marvel growing up. Can you tell? And comics have really raped and pillaged and plundered those fucking characters and ideas, and the people who created them. But the films are I guess, karmically balancing things. So the moment that everyone who was invested in the show probably was hoping for or anticipating happens, where the two Lokis finally passionately kiss, and he's almost got her convinced to calm down. I mean, there's some amazing. The pace of this is slow, and it's almost all in real time from the time that they come into the chamber to the end of the scene, and the last scene in the citadel at the end of time. And I don't know, like I said, I love stuff like that, especially this late in something, when you think a movie or whatever is one thing, and then it completely changes course, but gets better. Gets very different, and surprising, but not dismaying. And I love it when a writer, filmmaker, whatever, can do that. And this is kind of what they did. They kind of you realize now this whole thing was about Kang and Loki. It was about Loki to the extent of he was such a inveterate time hopper variant, time criminal, that Kang earmarked him. And of course, he ends up earmarking him and his female self, who was even more so dangerous all over the timeline. I mean, she's probably what really caused them to snag Loki from 2012, just because, oh, here's another Loki that could be like her. And maybe I'm stating the obvious. I mean, maybe that's all obvious in the show. I'm sorry. But there's also the serendipity, the right word? I don't know. There's a beautiful symmetry to the fact that it's a male and a female, and they're like two parts of a whole, and they're in love with each other, and they're drawn to each other, and they're the same being in love with himself or itself, whatever. And you can see that Kang, in a minimum of words, but through his words and the expressions the actor employs, I mean, you can tell that this is how our guy, he who remains, has chosen them, slash, and he wants them to take his place. But finally, it boils down to the fact that Sylvie's about out of control, even though she knows what will happen. Because basically, he says, "You have a choice. You can let me leave, and you can take my place and continue harmonizing the universe with the TVA, or you can kill me, get your wish, and I, I've had a long life. But when you do that, there goes the safeguard that's keeping all the other me's at bay." And, well, it's tragic because our Loki, he's hit kind of a height of earnestness and soulfulness and sensitivity, and he's in love, and he's trying to do a righteous thing to save the multiverse, save reality from becoming the multiverse again, and war befalling it, and so then his love betrays him, and it's pretty heartbreaking. And so spoilers, all these are spoilers. I'm going to assume you've watched this. So yeah, she kills Jonathan Majors' character, who has many names. And that's that. But he tells her before she kills him, "I'll see you soon." So yeah, and so that's kind of left there. Meanwhile, because she has sent Loki back with some of the time technology that she grabbed. She sent him back in one of those vertical monolith-looking things back into the TVA reality, and he can't get back. He's distraught, and he feels like, okay, now's the time. He knows the truth, so he's going to warn the TVA. He's going to warn Mobius and all of them. And he runs through all these aisles, and he's frantic, and again, just really emoting. I mean, Hiddleston is really in the moment of this character, just completely subsumed by this character, even in the most mundane kind of details of his movements and his expressions. And so he finds Mobius and the hunter, the other hunter, kind of supporting character we've seen earlier, and he starts telling them the whole story about He Who Remains, and this is the truth, and we've got to stop him, and we've got to stop this from happening. And then we find out that they don't know him. Mobius doesn't recognize him. He thinks he's an analyst because of the way he's dressed, because the last few episodes he's stuck in this TVA suit and tie, which he looks rather dapper in. And he's like, "Okay, you're an analyst. What department are you in?" And it's like, okay, so where am I then? I mean, and he looks over and he sees, instead of the timekeeper statue, in the past, there's a statue, and it's a statue. Again, the viewers who don't know the comic books won't know this conclusively, but we know it. It's a statue of Kang. He's got Kang's exact costume from the comics, but his helmet is off, so he's got the face of Jonathan Majors and hair. And I'm pretty sure Jonathan Majors is going to be wearing the helmet and the blue face. and Loki's in terror, and that's kind of where we're at. And it's like my friend Tim Tolbert said it reminded him of the end of the Planet of the Apes. Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of the end of Soylent Green. And it's got that Charlton Heston cautionary tale. Tell all the people, tell the people, and so it's too late. Reality has changed because of what Sylvie did, and at least the reality of the TVA now, the a reality within the universe and within the linear universes and timelines and our main MCU timeline probably hasn't changed at all. Because like Loki's already been killed in that timeline, and so whatever. Now the prime Loki exists outside of time, um, and he's been pretty much wholly redeemed for the most part. So he's like the hero, but no one will believe him. No one will listen to him. It is. It's a twist ending like you've seen Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, whatever, a million billion times. Um, that weird feeling, and it's great. It's incredible to see that kind of Marvel kind of I don't want to say co-opting or being influenced by more. It's more than an influence, but riffing on those kind of classic tropes. And I don't know, man. The show gave me a great feeling. I watched it a second time, and I was even more tied up in it. And yeah, I mean, Sophia DiMartino is great, and Owen Wilson's great. But Hiddleston and Jonathan Majors are like next level, and you're going to be spellbound by these two guys in this episode, in scenes with each other or just Loki scenes. So that's my summation on Loki. I've gone over an hour, but that's okay. It was a 6-part series. I didn't break down the plots of every single episode like I did with some of these other things, and I'm glad I didn't. I knew it all by heart, and I kind of knew where it was headed. So I wanted to make it smoother for you guys and for myself. And I also wanted to. The Kang thing is important because I had hoped it was going to be Kang, but then I thought, no, it's not. They'll say they're not going to do that. They're just taking some ideas. But early in the 6th episode, I thought pretty much. And then when He Who Remains came, I'm like, probably, but is he? And one article, which I thought was okay, said, no, that's not Kang the Conqueror at the end of Loki. And that's a deceptive clickbait headline. I mean, somebody's going to see it and go, that is the same character. Or the Wikipedia. A totally different character, but happens to have the same name and the same origin. And so I hate it when people try to overanalyze something to the point where they take all the magic out of it in order to feel smart or important within themselves. And half the time they've got all their facts wrong. Fuck those people. I have no use for that kind of mentality, whether the person is just a fanboy or a self-styled academic. I don't care. I don't like that stance. It's very repellent to me. And actually, the article that with that clickbait headline said, well, okay, yeah, actually, he's Nathaniel Richards, who's going to become Kang the Conqueror. And I thought, well, okay, yeah, all right, he is right. He didn't need to do that headline, though. But yeah, he is Kang the Conqueror. He is the character that we, as kids, the ones of us who've read the Avengers, grew up with the Avengers, he's the character and characters that we know. All of his selves, and that's what makes the character so fascinating and fun. So this should be pretty cool. Kang is going to be the official villain in the next Ant-Man movie, which I guess is coming out next year. And all the multiverse and the Nexus event things and stuff left over from Scarlet Witch are all headed into the Doctor Strange movie, which I think is coming out next February, March, by Sam Raimi, which is a huge upgrade director-wise from that other guy in the first Doctor Strange film that to me was a big failure. Not a total failure, but a big failure. But so Doctor Strange and Wanda are going to be featured. We know that. And it looks like Loki will probably be there too. And so we're going to get into the multiverse of madness. So Kang will probably be there too. So that should be an awesome movie. Sam Raimi doing those characters or that kind of story should be incredible. So in the meantime, waiting for Shang-Chi and Eternals. and the next series. I'm not sure what the very next MCU series on Disney Plus is going to be. I know Hawkeye is going to be one of the next ones, but I'm not sure what the very next one is. And doesn't matter. But the point is, they've hit an apex here. So hopefully they can, like I said, the possibilities are endless. They could keep going in all kinds of directions, and it really opens up the universe, kind of literally. So okay, that's enough out of me. I appreciate you listening. I wanted to get this off my chest. I'm not sure it came out that great, but I'm very passionate about it. I want to give a shout out to a very special person because she mentioned me in her video, but I was going to mention her anyway. Lauren Ware, and she's also a huge fan of MCU and the Loki and WandaVision shows. And we've talked about all that at length, and she's got a lot of interesting takes on things too. So, anyway, hi, Lauren. So, everybody take care, and I will see you soon.